So thank you, everyone, for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started. As you can see, the title to our presentation is Failure to Launch, Brand Protection and Go-to-Market Strategy. So,
yeah, welcome, everyone. How are the sweet potato brownies?
Were they good? Good? No? We had to duck out and missed out on dessert, unfortunately.
Yeah, we missed out. It's too bad.
We didn't miss?
No.
No miss? All right.
All right.
And so by way of introduction, I'm Zach Wolf. I'm a portfolio marketing manager here at Mark Monitor. I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of folks here in this room, designing and building brand protection strategy. And now I've recently moved over to the product side where we're doing some really kind of cool and new and innovative things that we'll touch on. And I'm fortunate enough to share the stage with my colleague, Ben Wellman.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Hi, Ben Wellman. Been with Mark Monitor for about 5 years, and now I'm in customer success. Yes, that's correct. But yeah, I've been working with a lot specifically with the counterfeit problem. So watching kind of the session earlier today, it was nice to see that all of the topics are going to be a nice fit, I think, for our presentation here today. So our failure to launch, that's Zach's doing and work.
Sure. So we'll briefly touch on the agenda. So there's a number of things that we want to cover today, but really kind of the overarching theme is if you're getting ready to launch a product, you need to make sure that brand protection is part of that strategy. You can really kind of shoot yourself in the foot if you have all of these folks and all of these different departments within your business doing all of this work, and then you go to launch the product and you find out, oh shoot, the counterfeiters are already there. You know, we've unfortunately seen that a time or two, and so Ben and I have, we'll share some best practices. We'll share some actual case studies. We'll look through a bunch of data that shows just how quickly counterfeiters can unfortunately kind of get into the market ahead of a product release. And then finally, you know, we've got some key takeaways that we'll sum up.
Not to interrupt, Zach, but wasn't having like decent graphics part of our PowerPoint strategy?
You know, we wanted to kick this off with having, you know, something so spectacularly bad, right, as a product launch. So I found the worst rocket graphic I could find. And then hopefully by the end, we'll show you guys what it looks like to launch an actual product and have it big and beautiful and successful.
So it's not supposed to be cratered into the ground?
When you launch a product, hopefully that doesn't happen.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And if you follow our advice, I think you'll avoid that. So as we took a look at different go-to-market strategies, we really wanted to kind of figure out if brand protection was traditionally included. So if I can we'll get a little bit of interaction. I know it's after lunch, and hopefully, you know, no one's snoozing out there quite yet. But just a quick question: have any folks in the room? Have you guys been involved in a product launch? Let's say in the last 6 months to a year. Any new product launchers out there? Anybody go through all the steps? We've got a couple hands. When you launched that, did you take into consideration all the brand protection strategy when you launched that product? Yeah? Maybe? Hit or miss? Okay.
Kevin's yes. Of course.
Kevin says yes, so we're going with that. So as you take a look, these are just some different go-to-market strategy distribution models that different companies might use. There's certainly some that we follow, but one thing that you'll notice through all of these different go-to-market strategies, there's a big black hole called brand protection. So you have all of these different departments doing all of this work. You've got research and development if you're launching a technology product potentially. You've got marketing, making sure that the positioning is ready to go. Legal folks in the room, you're doing all the work to make sure everything is available and cleared and no hurdles or headaches there. You know, but finally that brand protection piece needs to come together. And as we walk through this, we'll really kind of show you how important it is to make sure that you do the brand protection piece up front. As Ben is going to go through here in a little bit, how you can really help yourselves out by getting there before that product launches. You can really shift the curve and you can impact the online space. So with that, Ben, I'll let you kind of jump into some traditional strategies and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah. Thanks. So I think, you know, most of these are going to be pretty straightforward for this audience, but we know that kind of the IP and it's going to form the basis of our brand protection strategy. So we know that this launch is going to always, you're going to have your real estate considerations. So where is the space on social media, domains, et cetera, that you need? In the other breakout session, of course, they're covering domain, how you specifically cover that one item. But really just having thought out trademarks, domain names, social media handles, et cetera, are some of those IP considerations. You know, you've got basically your clearance, global availability TLDs. So all these, I think these are well worn and kind of apparent to what would be incorporated into your launch.
And one of the ones that I like on this particular slide is the mission critical domains before applying for trademarks, right? So in the other domain sessions and in the other domain information that we've heard, that, you know, making sure that you have all of those things kind of secure and tucked away, whether that's, you know, here we're referencing domain names, but I think, you know, making sure your social media strategy is put together, that you have all of those pieces lined up. Otherwise, you could end up in a situation where, you know, a few companies, they've launched a product and they find out that, oh, somebody owns this Twitter handle and it's a huge, you know, kind of issue. You want to make sure that the domain applications and then the, you know, using those third parties where you need can certainly come into play when you're launching that new product. So making sure it's all tight and ready to go before you start.
Absolutely.
Yep. So the next kind of piece that we want to move into is online-specific concerns. So I think that makes a lot of sense. We work in the online brand protection space. And so really, as we talk about go-to-market, what we're really trying to say is how do you anticipate what issues you're going to run into as you launch that product. So Ben and I kind of went through all of these different considerations, different clients that we've worked with, new product releases that we've done, and kind of figured out, you know, what are the things you should really think about and look for that can be potential, you know, roadblocks or pitfalls, business problems as you launch this product. So there's a kind of a laundry list, but really they fall into a few buckets. So the first one I think is probably, you know, one of the most familiar to the folks here in this room. These are IP infringements. So if you're going to release a new product and you do have, you know, all of your trademarks, you have all the classes. I think, you know, Lauren, you did a great job this morning kind of talking about how WWE works through the process, how you make sure that, you know, you have all the registrations. If something takes off, you want to make sure that you're all, you know, kind of squared away that way. I think, you know, copyright and trademark infringement is something if you're launching a product, you want to be specifically kind of tuned into. Brand confusion, and Andy talked about it, you know, during the automotive, you know, that brand confusion. If you're launching a product and it's successful, people are going to try to capitalize on that, and they're going to take, you know, your hard work and they're going to take their product and try to, you know, either drive traffic or confuse customers. And unfortunately, if those customers are confused, they're going to come back to you as the original business, and not potentially those third-party sellers that may have actually kind of gone in and tricked them or led them astray. False association, impersonation, that one we see quite a bit. And then finally, counterfeiting. I think counterfeiting is near and dear to all of our hearts. But if you launch a successful product, people are going to try to copy it. They're going to try to, you know, unfortunately, you know, leverage your success for their monetary gain. So as you're entering markets, kind of, you know, what are the issues that we're going to run into if you launch a product? You know, those IP infringement ones I think are key. The second one is an interesting bucket. So depending on your distribution model, you may have partners, you may have licensees, you may have authorized dealers. There's a whole host of names depending on, you know, your industry and your business that you might use. But if you have that sort of distribution model, you want to make sure that your partners know, you know, what they can and cannot do, what sort of material is coming for them to be able to leverage during that product launch. Do you have certain, you know, considerations on domains that they can register? Do they have their personal site? Do you want it all kind of housed within the corporate website? There's all these different things that you want to make sure that your partners are up to speed on. Otherwise, you know, you can have diversion again, so you have your partners, you know, either jumping the gun on launching the product. We've seen, you know, where people have broken the street date by a partner that wasn't quite aware that they were not supposed to have it up on their site yet. You know, that's never good to have a launch you've been readying for 6 months, a year, 2 years, be spoiled by someone throwing something up on their website, posting something on Twitter or Instagram that they weren't supposed to. Impersonation, again, if you have authorized sellers or dealers and they're acting in a way where they're confusing customers about, you know, what's an actual authorized channel, what's an actual authorized, you know, piece of marketing collateral, whatever it might be. And then finally, paid search, right? You've got keyword diversion. So again, if you don't have your partners kind of squared away, you know, they can be driving up the costs of your own keywords, which is an interesting situation to find yourself in. When your own keywords are getting very, very expensive and you do a little bit of an audit, you find out it's your own folks.
So you've got a few different business problems there, and I think a lot of times we think of these in different approaches, et cetera. And you've got chess there, right? I think it's almost like a chess match.
Yeah.
If you're one of these guys that are really good, you're thinking several steps ahead. And while it doesn't fit our launch motif, it's kind of the same thing as what we'd have like a checklist, right? Before we go into something big. So I'll touch on that, but again, just because if we're dealing with counterfeiting or a different type of issue or gray market, et cetera, I think it's good to use that analogy or think of it like that chess. Where are you going to be at 5 moves out?
Right. Yep. So if you're planning that strategy and you launch a product and then you see, 3, 4 of those different things coming at you, you're going to be behind the curve. But if you can think ahead, kind of anticipate, all right, when we launch this, I believe we'll probably run into these 3, 4 business problems. You can be much better off as you launch, right?
Yeah.
So this is where we kind of get into some of the messaging that you heard from Dave earlier about protecting, your well-intentioned consumer. So as you launch a new product, obviously you've got consumers that are going to be out there and they're going to be looking for it. So, you really want to make sure that as you build your brand protection strategy into your go-to-market plan, that you're looking, for the most visible results, and that the well-intentioned consumer is going to find. So as you release a new product, consumers are going to go to the areas that Dave mentioned earlier. They're going to go to the first page of a search engine to look for your product. If you sell it in a particular marketplace or your website, those are the places that they're going to go. And so as you devise your strategy, as you build your keywords, as you build your geolocations that you want to cover, whichever channels you think are most appropriate for your business model, those most visible results in that well-intentioned consumer is really what you want to be prioritizing first.
It makes me think because a lot of times when we're going after these infringers, we end up in a rabbit hole or some pretty strange places that, again, maybe your consumer's not living in. So a matter of scope and priority and focus going to those results where you think you might find them. So, and not, a domain name that is 34 characters long. And
right. It gets 0 traffic and no one's looking
right,
at
yeah.
it. Yeah, and I think one of the worst surprises of all that you can get is if you have a brand protection strategy in place and you think it's working, right? You're getting reports that say, hey, we're sending enforcement, this stuff is coming down, things are great, and then you get a phone call from up on high that says, hey, I went on Amazon and I found this thing right from the get-go. Right?
Yeah.
So if you don't prioritize that stuff, you can think that your brand protection strategy is working, you're doing all the right things to protect this new product and to get it out there and get it into the hands of people that want to pay for it, and then you get surprised because you're not, kind of prioritizing your search in a way where the people that want to buy it actually are.
Right.
So this goes hand in hand with, where do you want to look, right? So, and where do you want to start? So here is a kind of a mock screenshot that Ben and I built of one of our favorite marketplaces.
Your brand.
With your brand. And really on the bottom, it's self-explanatory. Where would you start, right? If you were going to monitor this particular marketplace or any marketplace, where do you want to look, right? Do you want to start on page 1 where everyone actually looks? Do you want to start on page 100 where no one is going to look? Or maybe you start somewhere in the middle. And if you don't have if you don't have a technology partner that has this kind of idea of prioritization, well-intentioned consumer, most visible, you could be spending all of your effort on page 100 and not even know it. Well, all the counterfeiters they're fighting for the buy box, right? They're fighting for the number 1 slot, and they're pushing that new product that's counterfeit, unfortunately, and that's where consumers buy.
Another thing that makes me think we overlook this at times, when we're launching a product, we're so considerate of domain space, social media names, but what does the marketplace look like?
Right.
Like, why not go out and, before you launch, take a look to see what else is out there, get an idea of the infringements you might encounter when you launch your product. Maybe it's irrelevant. Maybe there's something already there. But I think it's kind of a concept that would be similar to like a trademark clearing. Maybe do a marketplace clearing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you're, to bring back our previous topic about trying to anticipate those business problems. There's no easier way to anticipate those than to just go to, the marketplace, see what type of infringement you find.
See what's there.
Because it's probably going to get duplicated when you launch that new product too. So just another idea.
All right, why does it matter? So I think kind of where we get into the meat of this presentation is creating the sense of urgency that surrounds the counterfeit problem. Let's go to the next slide here.
Sure.
So a lot of times we think of counterfeit as rather than like a substitute problem, just something that's unique. We get rid of it, it's not going to be a problem. We can get it taken off. I don't have to consider it anymore. But I've got this concept or idea. You've got kind of your example of like a product life cycle. Well, The counterfeit, unfortunately, also has its own unique product cycle that can either run in tandem with yours, but what we need to manage is kind of the scope of how big that problem gets. So we've got a few different examples here, but ultimately the goal should be to take that product life cycle and shift it left. So you want it to end early, you want to mitigate the amplitude that it reaches there. And so we've drawn out a couple different lines here. You can see is, in the red curve say you do nothing, and it's allowed to flourish unchecked. Yeah. Or maybe yellow is kind of your nominal state. And so it matters how quickly we get started, and it's really got to start before you launch. So again, the goal, I want to shift that to the left there. So we took a look at this. We said, well, how quick are the counterfeiters in getting their product to market? Well, it's not a fair comparison because your counterfeiters don't have the same considerations in launching a product. They're not concerned about safety. They're not concerned about registering an IP portfolio to support it. Essentially, they can just create a listing in a marketplace and go from there. So we know that there's different complexities to products, and there's also different forms that this counterfeit problem takes. It can go anywhere from being a mass-produced product, where you've got an assembly line, or you're just churning out units in the tens of thousands. Or it can be as simple as somebody, in an apparel case, puts up a listing online and waits to see if anybody gets an order. Then when they get that order in, they just kind of scurry around to see what's on the shop floor, throw it in a box, and 3 weeks, 21 days later, it can be yours in the mail. So this idea of how long it takes the counterfeiters to get to market, initially we want to see how does complexity play into that? How, is it if you're making say a pharmaceutical or something else, maybe it's not as, they can put together whatever they want to sell you, right? Or apparel, that's pretty straightforward, right? But ultimately, because of these low hurdles, time to counterfeit, as we studied here, is effectively zero. Because again, as Andy was mentioning before, social media, how long does it take to create a post? But we did do a study on this. And so what you see here is the time to counterfeit study. And we were able to gather data from about 50 different product releases. And what you're seeing here is basically the intervals in terms of weeks between when a product was launched and how quickly an enforcement ensued. So this, in a certain degree, underestimates the problem because it's dependent on an action that follows positive identification of a counterfeit product, and then an enforcement going to the marketplace. So we've got 50 different examples here. The average time ends up being about 14 days or 2 weeks. But when you look at this, and when I put this data together, it wasn't what I expected. I expected to see kind of a normal curve that would basically look like a normal distribution, maybe with a slight skew to the left, because we know a lot of that's going to happen at point 0. And so we looked at it, and basically, to give you a little bit more details, these are apparel items, and so they're not particularly complex, and can be quickly reproduced. But this anomaly that you see in week 2, why is that? Why is it we were enforcing quite a bit in week 1, and then week 3 is where we hit our maximum? And again, this goes back to our product life cycle. This represents the time that, 1, the counterfeit is released to market, you detect it, you have to gather enough indicators to make an accurate report to get that removed. So what this tells us is time to counterfeit is effectively 0. You can't wait till after launch. And you can't wait till week 3 either. The first 21 days are extremely critical. But this also represents an opportunity because we can shorten, if the closer we can get to that 0 point, we can effectively reduce that time cycle. So in that first 21 days or so, it's basically over 90% of the detections were made and then enforced for these 50 products. Does that make sense? Any questions about how that was compiled or methodology? Okay.
Awesome. Good work.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that is key is going back to that product life cycle slide, right? Kind of melding the two ideas. So we've worked with customers, for significant lengths of time, where when we started their brand protection efforts, it was, kind of much further down the road when they decided to engage to protect their products. And we see it every single time. The longer you wait, the more volume that you're gonna see, the more effort it's gonna take to reach that kind of plateau where the counterfeiters have decided, all right, someone is out there taking my listings down and it's no longer profitable for me to continue to counterfeit this brand. I'm gonna go try and do something else, or I'm gonna stick around forever and ever and ever and fight the good fight. But as Ben shows here, and we showed on that product lifecycle slide, if you can get in early, you can shift that curve to where you're looking at a significantly less amount of time for the counterfeiters that are going to be out there, right? So you can go in and you can hammer them right at the beginning. You can make sure that those well-intentioned consumers are protected by prioritizing how you look, and you slide that curve to the left. I can't stress enough how helpful that is for the health of your product launches and for your overall brand protection strategy to get in early, rather than giving the idea to these counterfeiters or these other infringers that you're an easy target, that you can go out there and they can throw up those listings even if they don't have the product or not. We took a look at 50 different kind of unique brands that were selling these products. And we found all sorts of things. We found listings where they had been created, maybe the second or the minute that some news had been announced. And who knows what you're going to get, right? But if you look at it, it looks very legitimate. You place an order on one of these marketplaces, and you get a box of who knows what. And so the speed, and the complications, counterfeiters get to skip right over that. So it makes it even more important that you're on the ball, as you're looking, as 6 months, weeks ahead of time, that you're working in conjunction with your brand protection vendor, whoever is going to be monitoring this product launch from a brand protection perspective. You got to engage them early, and you got to engage them often, because you do have the ability to shift that curve and really disrupt the market.
Yeah, we kept the axis on this in positive numbers here. But depending on what your product is, if there's a long lead up to release, and that public information is public,
right,
it could be well before you actually release it. And you'll see we have actually a specific example of that we'll show in just a minute here. But those considerations are key. Like, what information do we release to the market? Certainly you got to promote beforehand, but considering the timeline of how you do that and incorporating that with your brand protection strategy. So saying, okay, if I'm going to have product release, I'm going to send that out, you better make sure you share that with your group.
Yeah, if marketing sends out something and you are not monitoring for the words that they're using or the positioning, you're going to find yourself, it's going to be tough. It's tough to make up ground once you kind of miss the boat. And then that's an interesting point you bring up, Ben, about how we did keep this in positive integers, where I think we did come across, and you have that case study of where the time to counterfeit would potentially be like -2 weeks, if you will, because we found some things out there pretty early.
I was going to throw around positive integers, though.
That's one of my favorite phrases. I like to use positive integer. You ready for the next one? And so, again, that well-intentioned consumer, they're not going to go out of their way to find fake goods, pirated content, or brand imposters. And so as you look to slide that curve to the left, as we mentioned, and you're calculating that time to counterfeit, based on product complexity and all of the other issues, making sure that your strategy fits that most visible, I think, is key. Between some of the other presentations and me being up here, I don't want to kind of be over dramatic about this well-intentioned consumer, but it's really the best way to prioritize. We've been doing this a really long time, and we've tried all sorts of different strategies, but starting there and then getting depth can really kind of help as you launch these products, because you're people that want to contribute to your bottom line, people that are fans of your brand, that will be promoting your new products, that will be out there trying to spend their money on your products. They're not going to go to these, these sites and these pages, they're just not going to be there, right?
Cheap outlet online direct to you from
exactly. Exactly right.
Net.
They're not going to go there. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I'd never get there.
And so we took a look. Dave had some of these statistics as well, but 91% claim that they would never buy a fake. So you have people that are out there and they're saying, okay, you have this new product. I want to buy it. I want to have an authentic online experience with you as a brand. I would never buy a fake. I'm sure there's some of those people in that 91% that claim they would never buy a fake, that maybe that's not true. But I think that percentage is probably pretty representative of the folks that you want to make sure you're incorporating in your go-to-market and brand protection strategy. 34% of people have been duped, right? I would consider myself a sophisticated online shopper now that I've been in brand protection for a number of years. But it's getting tough, between the way that marketplaces are changing the way that they display products, the way that they allow certain images to be used, the way that they've gone to a catalog structure. It can be very challenging from people in the industry to anyone that's looking on their favorite marketplace or platform to make sure that they're not duped. And I think this final, statistic is really, something that we take, very personally in our efforts to help you guys in your brand protection. But 86% of consumers believe brands should be doing more, right? So as they're out there looking to purchase your products or services, they are really relying on you guys to make sure that you're doing the right things. And unfortunately, if you happen to fall down in some of these issues or in some of these areas, it comes back to bite you. No one has ever really thought like, oh, that third-party seller, I need to return this to the actual business. I have a warranty claim or some type of issue. And so it's really incumbent upon you, the brands and vendors like us to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
And at the very minimum, to make as much distinction between what is legitimate, official,
it's a great point.
And what is not included.
And so if you don't do some of these things that we've mentioned, here are some of the things that we have looked at and that we try to mitigate for our consumers. So on the left, damaged reputation. I think that it can sometimes go understated as people think, ROI, bottom line. A really damaged reputation, it only takes, one person to have one bad experience to leave an online review or to reach out to a customer service, person, drive up those costs. Damaged reputation is huge. Customer confusion. They're looking to have that authentic experience and they get confused. They're not quite sure if this is authentic. Maybe it's a secondary product. Maybe they're just... Confusion leads to non-purchase and for them to go elsewhere. Search engine rank and channel conflict. So those three things you want to make sure that you're looking at, because all of those can affect your business, especially in the online e-commerce space. I think the second one that we hit on quite a bit, decreased profit margins. Everyone that is launching new products, unless you're completely altruistic, you're trying to make some money, right? And that's okay. But if you launch a product without the appropriate brand protection strategy involved, then you can be missing out on those profits. Revenue, we talked about paid ads and driving up those costs. Commissions, regulatory fines. We do have a number of customers, including automotive and pharmacy, that are heavily regulated, right? And so if there are people that are misrepresenting your brand, it could really cause potential issues if you're looking at those regulatory fines, which can be substantial. And then the two in the middle, I think, are kind of interesting. Supply chain circumvention, right? So if you're looking at launching a product and you're not taking the appropriate steps, then you have people that are creating their own supply chains by manufacturing just completely fake product. Or you may have partners that are looking to kind of offload the truck, if you will, before they should. Or they're using inappropriate channels to sell those goods at a potential market price that may not be the one that you want them at, right?
I'm looking at this graphic, and I think we missed the title for this slide. It should be the Venn diagram of product doom.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, the rocket picture that we had at the beginning, we should have put the rocket picture on this one, because this is all the things that can go wrong if you're not doing the right things.
All right, what do we do about it?
Right.
We've touched on a few of those things, but I mean, it's really formulating a proactive strategy and having your pre-launch, we'll call it our pre-launch checklist, all the kinds of considerations. One is, when does that information become public, and how do you start protecting in advance of that? Because really, I think we should be looking at, we're measuring everything by a product release date, but it's really that information release date that is our kind of our go time, or that starts our countdown. And that can be anything from sharing, what the marketing campaign is going to look like, and then including and incorporating that to your team to say, okay, here's what our collateral is going to look like. Here's the releases we're going to make. Secondly, what does your distribution look like? So do you have product? Does it get released to some people prior to the public? Because we see those pop up on marketplaces.
Right.
Ideally, if we can control that and not have the product go out and we see it on a marketplace before it's ever been released to the public, then we have a good idea what's going on. And then you can begin to gather information about what the counterfeits look like, your indicators. But I think controlling that trade secret really is critical during this launch phase.
And Ben, one point, just to jump in real quick, that you bring up, especially about kind of the inter-business collaboration, right? So if you have product people that are designing key features, maybe you've gone ahead and you've done kind of your own intellectual property due diligence. So maybe you have features that are trademarked, or you've filed patents, or you've done kind of the certain things that are going to make sure that you're kind of protecting your barrier to entry, or you have your core competencies protected intellectually, property against competitors or counterfeiters, infringers, things like that. So it's kind of it's an interesting idea, especially when you then think, okay, so we've got this kind of all squared away internally. Now I want to work with my brand protection team to make sure that we are protecting the right things. And so that can lead, and I think you're going to get into this here in a minute, but from the keywords that you use to scan, the places that you're looking, marketplaces, geographies, websites, social media, mobile apps, whatever your kind of channels du jour are, you want to make sure that they're covered and that you're using those appropriate phrases, and all of that has to come, ahead of time, and it's got to come from the right channels. So if your brand protection department is sort of locked away and you find out that you've got new marketing material, or you've launched some kind of promotional or positioning, if you find that out later, it's tough, right? It can be really tough. But if you're proactive in saying, hey, analysts or client service managers, this is what we're going to do, let's build a plan, right? Let's build a plan for the scans. I think Andy mentioned, kind of fine-tuning the scans over time, making sure that they align with your priorities and products. There's no reason that you shouldn't do that before a product is released.
Absolutely. We know they're watching. I mean, that's apparent from when we see a trademark registration where it's applied and then 200 domains pop up related to that right away.
Yep.
Derivative domain name. So, and we know it's from marketplaces. And so this bar chart here. It's got quite a few things going on here, but this is a single product case study that kind of started the thought process of why we need to have kind of just a rapid response and plan ahead for our launch. So this is an example of a single product. It's a consumer good that the counterfeiters basically came to market first. So you'll see here, week one, again, we've got kind of our intervals going. But we had scans that picked this information up prior to release. And in this case, the launch date and the information about this new product was released or given to us after it already hit market. But we went back and we looked at what our detections look like. So you see these purple lines here are all basically the detections that come into the portal, and then we evaluate them. So week one coincided with a press release. So the brand said our product's coming out on this date, and within that first week, we started to see the first detections. And so the question is, are those people that got it in advance and they're reselling it? Well, some of those were counterfeits. And you'll see the actual product release doesn't happen until week 5. However, like on week 3, we catch on, we say, wait a minute, this is not a legitimate product. And we start getting that communication saying, hey, yeah, we are going to release that. Let's go get them, right? So you can see here is purple and a percentage of that of green, which are our enforcements. We don't really hit peak efficiency until week 12. So again, if we could have moved this back and shifted that to the left, we could have probably had a better impact on this problem. But really, you see there, week 12, I mean, that's, 3 months after the information become public. that we finally have our full collection of indicators, we're aware of the issue, and we're out there targeting it. So, but that could have happened much sooner. And depending on how that was distributed, it could have happened, within week 1 had we had a better plan together. So you can see here, you can kind of see the outline of it. We've got basically our purple, and then green, we kind of hit it, we max it out in week 12, and then from there we start to get ahead of the problem and get it more under control. Another note on here, it wasn't until week 8 that I think the first seizure notice for that product was received. So by then we're still 8 weeks out.
Right.
So, but I think that exemplifies it. It really drives home the point for me is saying, okay, they are quick to market. Time to counterfeit, in this case, was negative 30 days.
And Ben, maybe I'll kind of ask you a question that I hope I know the answer to. If we were able to, in that week 1-2 zone, if we were able to kind of build the strategy and make sure that we were kind of doing all of the things that we've talked about, the proliferation curve where the green kind of expands all the way out to week 35 and beyond, do you anticipate that would have slid and then kind of the curve would have dropped off in a much steeper because you would have been in there first, hammering it hard, and then not giving them kind of that chance to breathe all the way up until week 12?
Ideally, and for one particular reason that I can point out, is that we know that counterfeit gets to market in a couple different ways. We can say it comes from a specific country in bulk, but then you also have the the problem of domestic resellers. So these are the people that will buy it in bulk, and then they redistribute it on an online marketplace, shipping from inside the US, for example. So if you can stop that before they get hold of all this product, and then it gets out of control online, then you are ahead of the game. Plus, you're going to have less to sift through.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, so we've kind of hit on all these. We've got the plan. We want to talk about next is leveraging technology. And I think we've got something that's interesting here that works nicely in combination with one, well-intentioned consumer looking in the most visible places, but we're also going to talk about how we can basically leverage that technology.
Sure. So really the first thing that we want to talk about is rank. So we've kind of hit on this, that your well-intentioned consumers are going to shop in the places that make a lot of common sense. But if you're looking at it from a brand protection kind of in-house perspective, what are the people that are reviewing these potentially infringing listings? How are they going to prioritize? How are they going to sift through kind of that volume of information that can be out there in a way that's going to do it in kind of the best prioritized manner? And so we use this idea of rank, and Dave mentioned this earlier, where we're able to kind of mirror what a consumer would see on any particular marketplace within our technology. So if we take this, for example, this was a search that we did on eBay. If you kind of think in your mind that this is a brand new product launch of a handbag, if you went on eBay, these would be the first 4 listings that you would see. If I'm our analyst or someone within your corporation that kind of is responsible for the review, they would jump in and see the same thing. So rather than kind of trying to boil the ocean or getting caught up in all of this noise and not being able to tell, what are the most important things to go after first, this idea of rank, I think, is one of the best ways that, Mark Monitor goes about kind of prioritizing enforcement, for action. And we pointed out that there's no time to waste when it comes to new product launches. So if you're able to say, okay, I want to look at the most visible things first for this new product, and make sure there's no infringements there, you've gone a really, really long way in making sure that you've protected your consumers from stumbling and unfortunately some of those infringing products that can creep up. And then the second one, this is a kind of a new technology that we're working on, and Ben's going to get into down in the weeds a little bit with it, but this idea of leveraging technology to prioritize infringements. So what we like to do in conjunction with rank is use technology to help bubble up listings that we think are potentially the most infringing. And the way that we do that is by this feature that we have called threat level. Every time anyone goes and takes a particular action, our technology gets smarter and it says, okay, the next time I see this potentially this type of listing with XYZ attributes, it's been infringing in the past, it's probably infringing again. Let me rise those to the top, right? So rather than, a lot of these consumer products that we can harvest, we could harvest thousands and thousands of listings. Well, if you spend your time reviewing all of the ones that are non-infringing, it doesn't leave a lot of time to find the infringements, right? So you need to be able to leverage some kind of technology to help bubble those up to the top. And so this is what it looks like in our particular portal, where anything that would be in red, based on our tagging, our actions, the machine learns and gets smarter and smarter. Anything that you see there in the yellow, those are tricky, right? So counterfeiters they're smart. They kind of adjust to trends. They switch their game up when they know that we've caught on to a particular indicator. So those are the ones that take that expertise, and that's something that I think we really do a good job at having that expertise to apply to those trickier cases. And then anything you see in green, we've kind of flagged that says this is probably not infringing, or this is the least priority on your list. So you combine rank with this technology, and you're really kind of competing with the speed of the counterfeiters, as they don't have some of those obstacles that we touched on earlier.
Yep. All right, so here's a fun graphic.
Follow the arrows.
I'm not sure if you can really quite decipher it, but it's basically a feedback loop. So you've got data coming in, and you detect all these listings, and a lot of times it used to be just, okay, I'm going to either enforce this thing or I'm going to delete it. So you end up deleting something that actually has valuable information in it, but not anymore. So basically, we tag everything. You say, well, how are you going to teach the machine how to enforce counterfeit on a product that hasn't been released yet?
Right.
So again, you got to have a brand protection program in place. But assuming you do, product is only a part of that. You've also got seller. You've got marketplace disposition that feeds into that. So it is possible to start to have an idea of how infringing a listing might be for a product that's never been released. So again, you go through this process for several months. You tag stuff, and assuming you've got other products, right? But you tag that and you teach the system, and then when your new product comes out, you still get a threat level score on it, because one, you might have a history with the seller. And again, we know marketplaces that are a little bit, we'll say, shadier than others.
Sure.
Could happen. So basically, you put that in, and you have this feedback loop that you get better, and more refined. So I do want to show what that, the bottom line of that. So on the next slide here, we can see what that equates to. So we grabbed about 13,000 marketplace listings that had been tagged, and then you can see here, not infringing, unknown, and infringing. So in this model, the higher the score, the bigger the threat. When we looked at these low, not infringing, it's a low threat, basically, only 0.3% of them were actually enforced. So, and you can see of this sample, 43% of those. So roughly 4,000 or so was basically noise. We can get those out of the way. We probably don't have to spend any time looking at those. The red, however, almost 2/3 of the ones that we brought in, which represents that 12%, were actually enforced. So of that 12%, we can quickly home in on the ones that are most likely infringing and quickly take action on those. And then yellow is kind of that opportunity space. But essentially with this, if you're going after the rank, if you're using targeted keywords, and then you can quickly get rid of about half of the things you potentially look at,
sure,
and then get those last 12% and make sure you've got those covered. So again, threat scoring is really a way to prioritize. It's not going to make the ultimate judgment call for you. You still have to have indicators. But it can make you much more effective.
And then, we've got just a couple key takeaways. Protect the well-intentioned consumer. You've heard that kind of all day. You certainly heard it from me. I'm a huge believer in that methodology, if you can't tell. But when it comes to product launches, is the case that we're chatting about today, or really any overall brand protection strategy, that's the place to start, because that's where you're going to have the most impact. If you try to boil the ocean, if you're kind of scattershot all over the place, you may be doing volume. You may be kind of getting this sense that you're making some sort of progress, but then you find something on the first page, and all of the hard work and all of the efforts and all of the internal selling that everyone has to do to get those budgets that we saw that was so kind of hard to nail down, and to get that internal buy-in that is always a struggle, to get the rest of the business to truly believe that brand protection is something that should be funded and something that should be taken serious. If someone finds something in that one of those spots, it can really just diminish all of those efforts. And so that, I think, is a key place to start, product launch or no.
And for all considerations, your time to counterfeit zero. It may ultimately be longer for your product. But as far as a planning exercise, assuming that it's going to be zero and that you're going to have to deal with infringement right away, you won't be disappointed.
Sure. And then finally, use data and analytics to help. So even though you have the prioritization, you've done all your due diligence up front, you've worked with marketing, you've got the keywords, you know the street date, everyone is aligned. The internet is still just a massive, massive place. There's so many different channels, there's so many different avenues that you need to leverage some sort of technology to help you. And if that technology isn't part of your prioritization, or if it's not helping you kind of prioritize what to look at or what to enforce or where the impact is, then you can find yourself in a difficult spot. So you need to make sure that the technology is working for you, not against you.
Yeah. All right.
And if you do all that, then you get a beautiful rocket launch and not the grainy crashed rocket that we had at the beginning. So it looks like we're out of time. Maybe we have a question or two. Matt? That's okay. Fire away.
So in the earlier slide, you guys said that 86% of consumers which brands would you want?
Uh-huh.
Does your definition of brand include marketplaces themselves? I'm thinking, and I'm spitballing here, but if I'm a consumer and I love brand X, and I go to marketplace X to buy brand X, and I get a counterfeit in return, I'm probably still, and I'm going to be bummed, but I'm still going to buy brand X, but not from marketplace X.
Sure.
And if your definition of brand includes marketplace, are you bringing that information, that particular metric, to the marketplaces themselves, so they're more interested in helping out the consumers and the brands?
Yeah, that's a great point, and you're absolutely right. So consumer sentiment when it comes to the marketplaces and platforms is something that we definitely do consider, right? And so if I buy from a particular marketplace and I unfortunately buy some infringing product, you're right. I might say, man, I wish that this particular platform would do something so I, as the consumer, can be more educated in what I'm purchasing. And I think people, while there are certain frustrations with the brand itself, I think the consumer sentiment and mentality is also starting to bubble up, in the news and conversations about marketplaces themselves and how they need to do more. This idea that it's not really our problem because we allow third-party sellers that aren't us to do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't really hold anymore, as marketplaces and e-commerce in general becomes so much more popular. That sentiment that they've got to hold themselves responsible as well, I think is swelling. So you're spot on there.
And I think with all the key marketplaces, there's an open channel for that discussion. They have a mechanism to deal with that because they made that realization as well, that their image is tarnished too. So.
Right. Yeah.
It's still not clear to me. For example, can you tell me if Amazon, for example, or eBay has a clear policy not to sell counterfeited products, or it's just a responsibility of a store? For example, their partners, like they not necessarily sell their product, they sell, you can establish a store over there and sell it. So it's still not clear to me. I try to find out it, it's kind of iffy. I think it's based on their partners. Thank you.
Sure. Ben, you want that one?
Oh, no.
So my answer would be that yes, every marketplace does have some sort of policy that they explicitly kind of ban the sale of counterfeit goods. Where I think you run into that that gray area is, one, the volume that some of these top marketplaces do is incredibly explosive, right? And so for them to be able to track every single instance, especially those that do third-party sellers, it becomes very complicated. I think that this may be a little naive on my part, but I like to think that every marketplace has the consumer's best interest in heart, and they explicitly do try to remove those counterfeit items. Does it always work? Is it always a great process? No, because we're in a room in a conference like this trying to discuss best practices and how to help yourselves work with the marketplaces to do that. So I would assume they all have some policy that says no, don't sell fake stuff, but you got to kind of navigate around.
The policy and practice is what varies.
Sure.
And how they practice that is certainly the hurdles and the obstacles that are put in place to remove that product does vary widely. And that's where we see those frustrations.
Yep. All right. That's
Thank
it.
you.
All right.
Yep. Thank you.
We're good. Thanks, everybody.
Yep.